Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Within Range Coaching Podcast. I'm Ranger, a certified holistic success coach, and in this podcast, I break down the journey entrepreneurs face as they start their organizations, overcome roadblocks in their way, and create an impact that lasts. We talk with entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and purpose-driven community members just like you. Together, we learn how to grow our impact and develop ourselves as the people behind the mission. My intention is to help more people. And remember, if you're curious about expanding your impact, growing a community, or defining your mission, vision, or values, we can chat off the record. You can find my info in the show notes or at my website, withinrangecoaching.com. We're also looking to build our sponsor community with organizations and individuals who align with our values of fearless innovation, social responsibility, and courageous candor. If you're interested in helping us highlight individuals doing great work in the world and share these values, reach out to me directly at ranger@withinrangecoaching.com. I know you're just as eager to get started as I am, so let's jump right in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Within Range Coaching Podcast, where today we will dive deep into the fascinating world of animals and conservation. I'm your host, Coach Ranger, and today we're joined by Brett Smith, an expert in herpetology, the founder of Sonoran Reptiles, and the reptile specialist over at Out of Africa Wildlife Park in Arizona. We'll be discussing the importance of creating naturalistic environments for reptiles in zoos and sanctuaries, the challenges of animal welfare, and how we can all contribute to making a difference for our scaly, feathered, four-legged, or no-legged friends. Whether you're an animal enthusiast or just curious about how we can better care for our scaly friends, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's jump right in. All right, Mr. Brett Smith, we are on the podcast. We are going. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm doing awesome.
Awesome. And as folks know, this is still part of my Walk Across America series where I'm interviewing folks that have helped me along my route in some way. And Brett helped me get through the Camp Verde area to Prescott, Arizona. So thank you again, Brett, for all your help and assistance there.
Yeah, it was a fun experience picking up some random homeless guy off the side of the
road. I know. It was. I think that was one of the worst storms that I've been caught in. The first day that he picked me up, I got caught in a crazy monsoon, and I had to hide in a what was it? Family Dollar, Dollar General for
General. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to hide in a Dollar General for like an hour and a half, making friends with the workers until he was able to get off of work and come and get me. So that was a fun little experience, you know. Not just a homeless unemployed guy, but a soaking wet homeless unemployed guy. But jumping into the reason why, you know, he's not just a savior of the homeless, he is also a savior of reptiles, amphibians, and other little cool critters from all around Arizona. So, I mean, Brett, you're a vet tech, you're the executive director at Sonoran Reptiles. And really the main thing that we're going to be talking about today is your work as the reptile department manager at Out of Africa. Before we get specifically into your role at Out of Africa, can you just talk a little bit about your background? Like, have you just always been a lizard man, or is it something relatively new to you?
I mean, I've always been an animal and reptile person. I mean, I think just to repeat everybody else's same exact story, grew up watching The Crocodile Hunter. Same guy who inspired all of us, it seems. Going out in my backyard in the Mojave Desert. I grew up in Bullhead City, which if anyone knows anything about that, it's basically just, we have a river and then just desert. So, there ain't much to do but go out and look for animals and stuff like that. At least there wasn't for me. I just grew up catching lizards, playing with snakes and stuff like that. And it, as I got older, it just was something that, never really went away and I just kind of obsessed with. So, I mean, again, everybody, like you were saying, everybody was inspired by Mr. Steve Irwin. But what about The Crocodile Hunter? Like what was inspiring about that to you? Gosh, I don't, almost like an adrenaline kind of thing in a weird way, because I've always been like really interested in like the scary animals, right? Like venomous snakes, like jumping on the back of a crocodile. that kind of stuff always intrigued me, which is interesting because I think the reason I've been able to do a lot of the things that I do, and working at different zoos and sanctuaries and stuff, I've been allowed to work with those animals because I'm pretty cautious and reserved, which is ironic because that's what draws me towards them. So I think it was just that, I just, when I think of my childhood, I just remember like him and his team, like jumping on the back of like, a giant, like 20-foot saltwater crocodile. I was just like, that's just so freaking cool.
So do you find yourself often jumping on the back of 20-foot saltwater crocodiles, or?
Not very often, unfortunately. No,
Not quite the focus over
it's
it.
still a dream, I'm
Yeah.
only working my way there. That's one thing I've never really gotten to do much, which I would love to do at some point in my life, is more work with wild animals and conservation and stuff. I see people like Forrest Galante. I don't know if you know who that is. He has he had a show that was on Animal Planet called Extinct or Alive, where he would go and he'd look for animals that were supposedly extinct and rediscover them to put conservation works into effort to conserve what animals are left of whatever species. But like that kind of stuff, like going out, getting hands on with like wild animals and like working to like protect native habitats is always something that I think is just, I don't know, just very romantic. And I've never really gotten to do that, but
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that it's, what draws you to, to Steve Irwin and what he was doing was like that very adrenaline junkie, that like exciting aspect of it.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it sounds like you're still kind of working on that. And it sounds like it's not just, I don't know, like there's like different kinds of thrills there. There's like the thrill of being kind of in a dangerous situation, but it's not just the situation itself. It sounds like it's for a greater purpose.
It's for a greater purpose. And I think it's a little bit of like the artistry behind it, right? Because it's like, it's not just going out and doing something dangerous for the sake of it being dangerous. It's like the fact that like, you know, a little like, 7-year-old boy can watch that on TV and be like, oh my gosh, that's scary. That's so dangerous. How can you do that? But when you really look at it, like, if you've ever worked with like crocodilians or if you worked with venomous snakes, it's like an art, right? It's knowing how those animals work, knowing how they function, and being able to manipulate that and work safely, even though it looks scary and dangerous, and it is, but there's an art to it. And I think, yeah, and like you said, it's all for like a greater purpose. It's, conservation work or, animal welfare is like, obviously what I'm involved with. So
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed too with like a lot of people that aren't, as invested, because I was the president of the Northern California Herpetological Society. Whenever I reference it, it'll just be NCHS from this point on. That was a big thing too, is that people are like, how are you comfortable handling this, this Burmese, this retic, this boa, this, crazy, it's like you were saying, it's like, well, there's an art. Like you have to know the animal, you have to know their body language. And just kind of, since we're even on the topic of Steve Irwin a little bit, like, wasn't there a quote he said where alligators are easy, they want to try to bite you and eat you. Humans are a lot more difficult, they'll try to be your friend first, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
there are certain tells that these animals have, and like it is like very much like something that you need to be involved with and interested in and really pay attention to, otherwise you could very much get hurt.
yeah. It's almost like high stakes magic tricks. It's like if you're a magician, you know what's going on, but to everybody else, they're like, "Whoa!"
Exactly. And I posted a picture of me holding your guys' Gila monster in a Prescott, Arizona page, and I had a few people like, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't be touching the Gila monsters. Don't you know those are venomous? Don't you know those are dangerous?"
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
I was surrounded by trained professionals. I myself am. I wouldn't call myself a trained professional, but I know a little about a lot. So I
yeah,
think I'm okay. But yeah, and I think what's also like, I don't know, just acknowledging you is you've been able to take that experience, being inspired as a 7-year-old boy watching the Crocodile Hunter like we all did, and you're doing something with it. So
yeah.
how did you kind of go from seeing Steve run around on TV doing his thing to now, like we were kind of saying off the record, having some of the best titles, in my opinion, of someone that wants to be involved in this work? Because you have 3 different roles as of now that are animal related. So how did you kind of fall into that?
Well, I wish I could say that there was like a turning point or something, and I think maybe to some degree there was, I think for most of my like young adult life, animals were like something that I really loved and was passionate about, but it was never like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do for a long time. It wasn't really until I got into I think like very early 20s, maybe even like 20, is when I was like, hey, I think I want to do this, for a living. In the sense that I don't know, I think for me it's just I kind of came to this point in my life where I started trying to fill my life more with things that I love and I enjoy. Because I think started with a mindset of like I need to work and then I need to use the money that I make working to do little bits of things that I enjoy, rather than just saying, why don't I just go all out and do what I love, do what I enjoy, which is taking care of animals, and then just keep filling my life with that stuff. And it kind of just escalates over time. It starts with like volunteering at this group, volunteering with this wildlife organization. Then all of a sudden you get offered a job, and then all of a sudden you have experience with like, these animals. So then you can do this, and then it kind of just escalates into, I love animals. I love taking care of animals, and anything that I can do that either furthers, my experience with that or my ability to do that is just opportunities that I take.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it was kind of piecemeal together at the very beginning, and then until like that was kind of like very much like a snowball effect, kind of like, oh, you
Yeah,
get this
exactly.
get this opportunity, then it moves into this, and then goes into this, and then so on and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and then it consumes your entire life.
And then it consumes your entire life. But it sounds like that's what you want to do. Like that's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think for like a decent amount of time, I like focused on trying to make money, right? Which I still want to make money. I mean, who doesn't want to make money? How many animals I could help? If I had $1 million. I think I was putting the things that I love, like animals, for example, taking care of animals, doing all the things that I want to do with animals, as like a side burner, like the secondary, and then like making money and like building a career as like the primary. And I kind of changed that just slowly and gradually over the years. I left a really well-paying job that I was at for like 5 years um, to go be a vet tech, because I was like, well, I'll learn more about veterinary medicine. I'll get to take care of animals every single day. Um, and I don't make nearly as much money, but I feel a lot happier, and I feel like I'm learning a lot more to grow myself and to be able to do what I want to do better.
yeah. I feel like I think that's a weird crossroads that a lot of people come to. It's like, do I want to follow my passions or do I want to make money? And I feel
Yeah.
like that's a very common thing with people that are into animals and art. Like that's kind of where I hear it from the most, or maybe those are just the people I
Mhm.
run around with the most. So it's kind of interesting that you're just kind of like, all of my money is going to go towards this other thing anyway. And knowing how much vet bills are for exotic species,
Yeah.
I would almost wager that you make more now because you're able to do some stuff on your own.
Right. Yeah. I saved Sonoran Reptiles and myself a lot of money by working at a vet clinic, because I get the vet discounts, and then also knowing what the heck I'm doing, which I knew a decent amount about medical stuff before getting the vet job, but knowing more about what I'm doing,
Yeah.
saves me a lot in vet bills and stuff like that. And like I said, it kind of goes in a circle, because if Sonoran Reptiles doesn't have the money, I'm the one that ends up fronting it. So
Yeah. The buck starts and ends with you as
yeah,
the dude on
exactly.
the paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey everyone, just a quick message. You know that my mission with this podcast is to share stories of influence and impact so that we can help more people help more people. But to do that, I need your support. Please rate, review, and share this podcast. If I could ask for just one favor, it's to just leave a review. It takes about 10 seconds and a few clicks, but it means the world to me and could inspire someone else to make a difference. Thank you so much. Now back to the show. Just to kind of get a little bit of a timeline. So were you doing your work because I think the way I have it in my head is that it was kind of like vet tech, Sonoran Reptiles out of Africa. Like, what's kind of the timeline?
I assume that everybody knows everything. I don't talk about myself too much too often, so I don't tell a lot of details. So I did skip over that. Yeah, so for the longest time, just to give a timeline, I would work and volunteer on and off, just through different nonprofit organizations or zoos and stuff like that, just to be around animals and get experience and whatnot. And at a certain point in time, and this escalated very quickly, I went from, volunteering with different organizations to being like, one day I was like, hey, I want to, like in my head, you know, being the young me that I was at the time, I was like, I want to start a zoo, right? So Sonoran Reptiles came first in this. I'm just kind of escalating to where that kind of came up is I was like, I want to start a zoo. So I don't have any money. So zoos cost lots of money to do. So I was like, well, why don't I just start small? And I was like, I've been volunteering for a lot of educational organizations and stuff around my area, teaching people just about native and non-native reptiles. And I was like, well, why don't I start doing stuff like that? So I started just unofficially, not on paper, not with any paperwork or, official tax filing, just doing educational stuff. And it very quickly ramped up to where it was like, oh, you know, this person's calling and they want a presentation. This person's calling, they want a presentation here. This person came to me and they're like, hey, we saw you doing this presentation. We have a ball python we can't take care of. Can you take this? And I was like, okay. Right. And I was like, sure. And that just kind of happened so quickly over the course of I would say a year. Things just started ramping up really quick while I was doing a lot of this stuff. And there was an older guy in our community in Sedona that used to do a lot of educational stuff. And he had a small group that he had put together that would do education around the community for reptiles and whatnot. And he was deciding that he wanted to retire. And he wanted somebody that could kind of take over that kind of aspect of things in our area. So he came to me at a certain point, and I'm not sure if this was right as I was starting Sonoran Reptiles officially, or if it was just before. And he was like, hey, he's like, all these shows that we do, he's like, you take them. And he's like, and all these animals that I have, you take them. I was like, okay. So I started Sonoran Reptiles, and it kind of escalated from just doing that to when I decided, hey, I want to do a nonprofit because, I think, the structure as for what we're doing kind of fits the nonprofit bill. Also, I feel being somebody who doesn't come from a lot of money, as when you have a nonprofit, it's not that it's more lucrative than a for business thing, because it's not. Especially not lucrative as on a personal level, right? I'm not making any money, but in terms of getting started, there's a lot less cost involved, getting started up with a nonprofit, in the sense that, you can get support, you can get donations, you don't need to pay taxes on the things that you're doing. So when you're smaller, I think it's a lot easier from that aspect. So I went in and I started filing all the paperwork. I got, I don't know what you would call it, but somebody who knows tax paperwork.
Like an accountant kind of person or actuary.
To help file all that stuff and get it all set up. And I was just like, oh, it was very much winging it. It was I know this person runs a nonprofit. Let me ask them what they did. And then they would give me a little bit of advice, and I just go start doing that. And then it was oh, well, you need a board. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just started going around. I was like, this person volunteered with this group and they're involved with the reptile community. Go ask them. Go ask this person. Go ask this person. So I just started asking people around me who I knew cared about reptiles. Not even people who I really associated with very closely, just people who I knew cared about reptiles. And I built my board basically that way over the course of a month. And then we filed it. And then we filed our nonprofit paperwork literally as Everything was shutting down for COVID-19 in 2020. It was like right in the middle of March. So the paperwork took forever to go through and actually get filed once it was, or approved once it was filed. And then it just kept going from there. All during that time, I was working a full-time job doing sales at an art gallery in Sedona. So that was basically what I was doing for money for myself and to help support everything that I was doing. Because it does cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to do that, to do this kind of stuff. Even just the education side, you know, buying like displays and buying like the startup stuff, tables, all that little stuff, it all adds up. So it does cost a lot of money.
I think
Um,
that I've heard that a lot, and I've experienced this. And every time I go to buy anything for when I was with NCHS, it was like, man, this is the perfect example of selling shovels to gold miners. Like,
yeah,
there's no money in the gold, but the shovels, the poster
right.
boards, the tablecloths, it's like, man,
Yeah, yeah,
like these
yeah.
are insane. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So at that time, yeah, like I said, I was working sales, so I was making pretty good money. I was making decent money. I had a job where that job was very lenient, where I could take time off if I needed to. I could move things around, and I had very much a schedule that I could do all this stuff around that. Um, and then it eventually got to the point where, outside of just some personal things with that job and whatnot, like new management moved in. Um, I was kind of like getting burnt out from that. I was like, I'm tired of like selling stuff to people. Like, I just want to do animal stuff. It's like I've been making decent money for like 5 years, and it hasn't really done much for my happiness. You know what I mean? So I was kind of like, I just wanted to move into something where I could enjoy what I was doing a little bit more and feel like I was actually like growing in the areas of my life that I wanted to. So that's when I started doing the vet tech job. I picked up the vet tech job, um, and that's been great. It's been a learning experience on a whole bunch of levels. Just everything from like what you would expect, right? Like learning about medicine and treating animals and such. Uh, Even down to like just really change like putting a new perspective on like how different aspects of the animal world communicate. Working in zoos and sanctuaries, doing the educational thing, and then moving into the veterinary side. You'd think it would all be very similar, but it's all very different. It's just, it just is different. The way that people think about animals and the way that you see them is different. Versus like a zoo or obviously like pets and then stuff like that. So it's all different. So it's interesting to see those different perspectives of things. And then recently got picked up on the out of Africa thing. So that was a pretty new development. That was, I want to say new development is probably about 2 months ago now, at least. So I've only been there for a short period of time, but
Yeah, and I know that we again we kind of discussed this a little bit off the air. Now we're doing it again on the air. But it sounds like with each different area you've been in with animals, it sounds like it's like a dice, right? Like it's the same piece, it's all the same thing it's centered around, but there's different like perspectives or different goals or missions with each thing.
oh
Whereas like
yeah,
there's different things with your pet at home
yeah,
versus the pet that's in front of you at the vet clinic versus the animal that comes in to the rescue versus what's at the zoo. Like,
yeah.
could you talk a little bit about more of what those different perspectives look like and what you mean by that?
Gosh, yeah. I think I can get too deep with that because like I've been thinking about it a lot recently. Like for example, when you work in the rescue or sanctuary world, right? Um, there's like I think you could kind of guess it from the outside, right? Like there's stereotypes, right? Um, if you go into a rescue, your stereotype in your head is a whole bunch of animals, right? with like maybe minimal care. That's like stereotype. Now that's not good, and that's not necessarily the case a majority of the time, but that becomes the stereotype when people think of a rescue or something like that, right? Animals that were poorly taken care of. Now there's a bunch of them in this rescue, and they're not being poorly taken care of anymore, but it's minimal space, minimal, whatever, and then rehoming or whatever it is. Or if it's, a sanctuary, then it's permanent sanctuary and stuff like that. Example would be like something like Phoenix Herp Sanctuary, where they provide permanent sanctuary to tons of animals that just can't be pets. And when you're in that world, your mindset is very much like, what it is like, how do you help the most animals the most effectively, right? Because there's so many animals that get dropped off that people can't take care of and stuff like that. And you have to really balance taking in all those animals, right? And providing them the like good care. But I don't think that the mindset's not usually like, what is the absolute best care for this animal? It's, how do we get this animal its basic needs, right? And then move on to the next. So it's helping a large amount of animals. And again, I want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that those animals aren't being taken care of, but it's not, they're not in giant zoo enclosures. It's different, right?
And then to just kind of like, because I know that there is a little bit of that judgment and that self-judgment that you kind of experience as a rescuer. Like my personal pet leopard gecko had super pretty enclosure, super good,
Yeah.
I don't know, in my opinion, a really good setup. But then the rescues that we would bring in, like they would have paper towel substrates. They'd be in a small tote. Like it becomes different.
Very much about efficiency.
Yeah. And it's like in the space.
It doesn't necessarily mean bad for the animal.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a different mindset is what I was, like I'm saying here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think so you can kind of understand that. It's not that, it's very much about how do we effectively provide, the basic needs for as many animals as possible. Right. So you're constantly trying to help these animals and bring them in. And it's very much like not money based at all. Like I don't like when an animal comes in for like Sonoran Reptiles, someone drops something off. Never ever do I ever think, how much money is this going to cost? It's just like, let's do it. Let's get it going. And, it costs money. It ends up costing like hundreds of dollars sometimes per animal that comes in if you have to put together all new enclosures, because usually if someone's not taking care of a bearded dragon, they're not dropping it off in the nicest display enclosure that, you want to keep it in forever. It's usually in like a 20-gallon tank that you have to move it out of and build something bigger for it. So every single animal is associated with a huge cost. But you never think about that. It's, how do we effectively take care of this animal, right? And it's not, and again, like I said, it's not to say that cost isn't an aspect, because it always is. And then when you move into like the zoo world, it's a lot less quantity based and it's a lot more quality based. So you have, you go from having a ton of animals meeting their baseline to you're not really helping any animals necessarily, right? You have a handful of animals that are on display, and maybe, the zoo sends some money for conservation work. Maybe you're doing some research for some certain species. But you have like 40 animals, right? Like for example, the reptile department in Africa, you have like 40 animals, right? And it's like, out of those 40 animals, like your only goal is, how do I make their enclosures look nice for the people? How do I give them the optimum care so they live the longest? And that just becomes it, right? So it's very individual based. And there's a lot more like personal attachment to those animals, which is, I think, a very like, it is an interesting mindset, because you switch from what do you do to take care of these animals, like their basic needs, and you switch from education and stuff like that to more towards, focusing on almost like their pets. And I would say that it's pretty similar in an aspect to a hobbyist, like keeping a pet, where, if you have one, green iguana, I see this all the time on like the internet. People have like one pet green iguana, and like they deck out their whole room to take care of this one green iguana. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's super cool. So you kind of get like that aspect of it where it's a lot more focused, which is great, because I think your quality is better, but your impact is probably a little bit less in terms of what you're doing for, the animals in general. Like, if you want to give a green iguana a 100-foot by 100-foot enclosure, you're very limited on how many green iguanas you could take in if they're rescues and stuff like that, right? And then when you move into the vet world, it's very interesting because it's like, for me, it was totally different, like the way that people think about animals, because it's a lot more like, and I think I've talked to you about this before, it's a lot more like finance based. And it's not to say that anybody in the vet world does what they do because of money, but you make money because of what you do, right, with the animals. So when you work at a zoo, people pay you money to take the most care of those animals. People pay you money to make these beautiful giant enclosures that these animals look super cool in. That's what you get paid to do, right? When you're at a sanctuary, you get paid to take in and provide a better life for animals, right? And that's not necessarily like, you could charge like a surrender fee or something like that. But your grants and stuff, the stuff that people pay you for, like the reason you get your grants is because you're helping those animals. So the more you take in animals and give them a better life and show that you can do that functionally and effectively, the more money you make, right? The more successful you are because you're making a bigger impact. The bigger the impact you make, the more you're likely to get grants and stuff and be supported by your community. When it comes to like the vet world, you're getting paid to treat the animals, but you're getting paid by the people who own them, not yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so people bring you these animals and it's like, okay, this animal has an abscess in its face, for example, right? Okay, yeah, this is a perfect example. That bearded dragon you saw when you were over at my place had a big old abscess on its head right above its eye. It turns out to be its sinus. I think it was its sinuses had gotten infected and turned into an abscess, and it was just this bulge that came out. Me knowing what I know, working in the vet world, working in the rescue world, and being able and taking care of those animals, I was able to go in there, pop out a big chunk of pus, and clean that out, and start that animal on antibiotics, and it cost me nothing. That cost me $0 to do, right? 100% free. I got a big vial of antibiotics for my work for like $20 at cost. And I have enough that I could use it for other animals. Like it costs virtually nothing to take care of that animal, right? But if another person was to take that animal into a vet clinic, not having that experience, knowledge, and ability, they would take that animal into a vet clinic and it would cost them like $80 for an exam. And then, it'd probably be some lab work, blood work or something is associated. There'd be like a wound cleaning charge and there'd be the charge of the antibiotics. By the time they walk out of there at a cheap clinic, they're going to be paying like $300 up to like even like maybe $1,000, depending on what goes on, right? If you don't have that money, guess what happens? That animal dies. You either let that animal degrade because you don't have any way to pay it, so you just let it go. Or like the vet clinic might euthanize it for you because a euthanasia charge is a lot less than treatment charge for some things like that, right? So it's very different in that way because it's more finance driven. It's very strange, I think, for me coming from because it's like, yes, best care for the animal is the priority, but it's with like only with a with a cost, right? There's it can only happen if the money's available in that sense, which in all the other aspects of animal care, money has to be available, but the pay structure and where you're getting paid is and how and why is different, right? If that makes any sense. So I don't know. It's just interesting. And I think because of that, people have a different perspective on things. I think like, from working there, like it's made me feel when I like take in bunches of animals and I'm able to pay for, all this care for these animals, I have a perspective on it of, I have funding from the organization, right? take care of animals. I have my own experience and stuff, so I can do a lot of things on my own. So it's the cost per animal goes down, right? As you know what you're doing and as you're more capable of doing these things and you have those resources. Versus like if you're a regular person, the cost per animal is a lot higher. The amount it costs me to take care of a bearded dragon every single year is probably like half, if not less than half, especially if you take into consideration vet costs for the average person. So it kind of puts a perspective on me of like, as like someone looking into the reptile hobby or the animal keeping world in general, whether it's a dog or a cat or a boa, I don't think most people understand how expensive it is to keep an animal. So it gives you this perspective of almost like, how like should most people be having pets, and how many pets should you be able to have? Not in the sense that I think that we should restrict people from having pets or anything like that, but I just don't think that a majority of people realize what it actually costs and what it actually takes to have a pet or to have a dog or a cat or even a bearded dragon, because I think the bare minimum that it takes to keep them alive might seem low, but if you're actually going to take good care of them, you're going to take them to the vet when they need to. You're going to get the procedures done when they need done and that kind of stuff, or like provide them good quality care and enrichment. That costs a lot. And I think, working at the vet field, it's really put a perspective on me of like most people, I don't think have that perspective or even capability a lot of the times. And it's kind of sad, when you see it. And it makes sense to me. It kind of comes full circle why these animals get dropped off with us, right?
Yeah.
Because before it's like, oh, well, why did you get this bearded dragon if you can't take care of it, blah, 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 blah. But then I got to see that other aspect of like, oh, this person just went into the vet and they told them that it's going to cost them $1,000 to do what I just did for free in 2 seconds, right? So it's just interesting to see all those different perspectives around, like you said, these different sides to the same dice.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting thing too, because that's just the things you're touching on there is, I don't know. I feel like we could have a whole other hour and a half long conversation about if people should have certain pets, which is like such a weird thing to say, right? Like I'm definitely not one to say, if you're taking care of them, they're hitting the 5 freedoms of animal husbandry. Yes, if you can afford it, do whatever. I get it. But also it's like, I don't know, it's like the cute animal syndrome. Like they go into a Petco and they see the super cute baby bearded dragon. It's standing at the glass. It's waving at them. They think it's like the cutest freaking thing. And when I was talking to Victoria from House of Voodoo Reptile Sanctuary, it's like I got my bearded dragon for free from a friend. And, it ended up being the most expensive free animal that I could have ever imagined, because I get it home. And then I was like, I should Google how to take care of this thing. And it's like $400 or $500 just to get the initial enclosure, like $20-$30 a week for food when they're babies. And then I had to, like you were just saying, I had to take my bearded dragon to the vet for an abscess on her mouth. And the vet's like, oh, we need to do this, this, this. And I ended up getting a $400 picture of her taken for an x-ray. I think it was like 200, but it's like, these things are crazy expensive. And, unfortunately, fortunately, there's nothing they could really do to help her because it is in such a weird spot. So they're kind of just like, oh, just drain the abscess and like, just do whatever you can to, just make sure she's eating. Yeah. And I'm like, it cost me $700 for you to tell me that. But it's like, I didn't have the experience and like, I didn't know any better. And it's, it's one of those hard things. It's like, you got to go to the expert to be better safe than sorry. But that value of knowledge is like not as, I don't know, I feel like that could be more prevalently explained. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's an important part of I think what we do is like rescues. I think one of the biggest parts of rescues, of a good rescue, is education. And I think that's a big part of it is I think even I'm guilty of this to some extent. Our education curriculum for like presentations and stuff is very much obviously based around like native animals, based around conservation and understanding and stuff. Part of the problem that comes with it is like, we're teaching people to love reptiles, and then they go and they get a pet reptile, and then they don't know what to do with it. And then it ends up at our sanctuary because they didn't know what to do with it. So it's almost like this full circle effect. And I think we need to be better at teaching people the importance of doing research and like knowing what goes into it all. And I think that stuff isn't completely out there, especially when it comes to like what kind of financial responsibility you're going to be looking at. Like what you said, with your bearded dragon, getting all that enclosure set up, but then like there's so much maintenance that goes alongside of it. And if you don't know, if you didn't do your research good enough around the first time, something goes wrong, or just something goes wrong because things go wrong, right, with their animals, and you have to take it to a vet. It's like, okay, well, now you have to pay your vet fees, and most people don't have any idea how much that usually is. And then you have to find a vet that like can treat exotics, and then you have to find a vet that like will treat exotics, but also knows how to treat exotics, because those are two different things, right? Some vets will treat exotics but don't know what they're doing. so that adds an aspect to it. If you live in a small town somewhere, be ready to drive an hour or 2 hours to a larger city where you can get a specialist, to see your bearded dragon for something silly,
And it's just doing that background or that research before you even get the animal. It's like those things you don't even think of.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's another thing that people don't typically like to think about is what happens when things go wrong. They just kind of think to themselves like, oh, well, I'll just do everything I can to make sure nothing bad happens. It's like, yes, preventative medicine is the best medicine. But again, when you have silly little animals running around, like, what is it, like with horses? They always say like, they'll cut themselves on air. Like there's like, you'll look at them funny and they'll be like, I have a colic. And it's like the same thing with a lot of animals. Like these things just happen.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Welcome to the mountaintop. Are you an entrepreneur or nonprofit leader ready to make a bigger impact in the world, but aren't quite sure how to do it or even where to start? Then join the Never Peak community on School, where bold movers, shakers, and magic makers come together to achieve their dreams and support others on the way to theirs. Our goal is to help leaders change the world by first focusing on themselves, by fostering a community rooted in support and learning. My goal is to help you be more effective in your organization, achieve your biggest dreams, and make time for what really matters in your life. In Never Peak, you'll find weekly book clubs, engaging courses, weekly mastermind calls, monthly Q&As with industry experts, and networking opportunities that span the globe. Our courses and discussions cover essential topics like personal finance, work-life balance, goal setting, relationship building, business topics, and so much more. Each course is designed to support you to holistically grow yourself as the person behind the mission. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention. At the time of recording this, the community is completely free. That's right, you can get started for $0 down, but that won't last for long. All you need to do is go to school.com, that's SKOOL.com/never-peak, or hit the link in the show notes to claim your spot on the mountain. Again, be sure you get in now, because I cannot wait to see you there and witness the peaks you'll reach in just a few weeks.
And we're getting kind of close to the hour, but I did want to hear a little bit more about when it comes to you and your work out of Africa. And I really do enjoy this discussion we've had about the difference between the rescue / sanctuary, a zoo, pet, and vet. I feel like there's some kind of cutesy continuum graphic that we can make that explains those differences. There's something there. But the thing that caught my eye the most with that was with the zoo, it's less quantity, more quality. And Can you just talk for just a few minutes a little bit about what your goals are there and why Out of Africa reached out to you specifically to help them out with their reptile department?
Yeah, so obviously I've talked to you a bit about this, but to reiterate for the audience too. So obviously I work as a vet tech currently, and I run Sonoran Reptiles, so that's a lot of stuff to do. But I do the vet tech job part time. So Out of Africa called me at at a certain point, and they said, "Hey, I had interned there for a little while, some odd years back, maybe like 2021." Um, and they called me and they said, "Hey, our reptile department is getting really thin. They're like, we have two people there um, at the moment, which I think full staff for them is like four people. So they have two people there. One of them's never worked in a zoo before, not much experience and stuff. So they're really slim on care. And their previous manager had left, and they had been having a hard time finding somebody to move in there. Not only that, but they were kind of dissatisfied with the way that the department had been looking for the last couple of years. Everything has kind of gotten stripped down to like the bare minimum. They felt like the husbandry was a little bit off in some places, and they just really wanted to make the place like just bring it to life. Like verbatim, their words was, "We want to bring life back into the reptile department." I was like, okay, I can do that. They called me and they said, "Hey, we've talked to this person, we've talked to this person at the park. They all recommended you." I said, basically, I was like, if you want me to go on there full time as a manager, it's going to cost X, right? That's what I need to pay my bills. Not a crap ton of money, but zoos and sanctuaries are notorious for paying very low, minimum wage or close to, because there's just not a whole ton of money in it, right? And it's a very usually competitive, job market, in the sense that everybody wants to work at a zoo. Obviously, in this case, it's a little bit different. So they were like, "Well, we can't do that. We don't have the money and the resources to pay you that much." And they were like, "So if you know anybody, please let us know." So I was like, "Okay, no problem." Beep, hung up. A couple days later, they called back and they were like, "Hey, we called around at a couple of different places to ask if they knew of anyone that we might be able to hire." And they were like, "And everybody keeps saying you." I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Are you going to pay me?" And they were like, "What can you do?" Because basically, if I was going to quit my vet tech job, I would to replace that job, I would need to make at least X amount of money at so many hours, right, to pay my bills. So they were like, "Well," so I was like, "Well, if I don't quit my vet tech job and I just do this on all the other off time that I have left, so I don't have any life, I was like, I can do it at whatever the rate you're able to pay is." So I took the job, and I'm there just a few days a week. But I go there, and basically, I've been going through, and I've just been trying to, when I got there, there's the person who built the place. Dean was the original owner. His wife is running the place now. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. I know from when I met him that part of what he liked is giving animals a lot of space, right? He wanted animals to have places to go, to roam, and to have, interactions with other animals. Like, he does a lot of cohabitation and stuff there, which I think is cool, as long as it's done safely and intelligently. So the enclosures are big, but they're just really like not optimized. And what I mean is like, I've shown you pictures before, but they have these things called the bays, where they keep their giant snakes, and they're probably like, I don't know, like, and maybe this is like, I would say like maybe like somewhere between like, I'd say like 15 feet wide by like 6 feet tall by like 6 feet deep, right? They're pretty big enclosures for like, a reticulated python. So they're decent size, it's adequate enough space. The snake can move around. They got these big pools in them, but there's like nothing in them. So it's literally a concrete base with their pool. And majority of them, they have like a couple little like shelves that are made like to look like kind of realistic rock that are coming down, so they can kind of get up on these shelves, but they're just barren. They look like literal rock caves. Like they're just empty. Like it's like there's nothing in them. There's nothing for the animals to do. And what I found out is there used to be logs and like stuff for them to climb on. There used to be like live plants and stuff in there, and all that stuff had been like taken out by previous management. And the owners expressed to me like that the previous management like did that stuff and then just didn't ask them about it. They just took it out because they didn't feel like there was always like some sort of issue with it, right? Things that I felt like could have been worked around or like were kind of like not a huge issue. For example, there's scorpions that get inside those things. If anyone doesn't know, here in Arizona, we have scorpions. Some of them are potentially dangerous, especially to like animals like reptiles. They can get stung and they can potentially die. So scorpions will get in these cages. And one of the reasons that the previous management had taken the logs and stuff out, like the decorations, they said that there were scorpions hiding in them. That's fair. But my approach was, the scorpions are still in there. Like they still go through. We have to find the scorpions and take them out because they still get inside of these things. So it doesn't matter if there's logs in there for them to hide in, or the scorpions are getting in either way. So our focus needs to be like, how do we stop the scorpions getting in and blah, blah, blah. But not to go on to like too much of a rant on that specific topic, but it's like things like that where it's like I've been putting in, we've been decorating the enclosures, putting in logs, planting real plants and stuff like that. So just making the whole place look a little bit better. And then the husbandry, right? Going through and kind of like fixing a lot of like little stuff that's like kind of going on. Like, for example, since we're on the topic of those bays, those things are like insulated boxes that they keep the humidity between like 80 and 90% in, which is like, okay, it's a reticulated python, but they're like these stagnant boxes. There's no air circulation. They just sit there. So a lot of the snakes were having like respiratory issues, chronically coming back up and stuff like that, because there's no system in place to help aerate and vent those enclosures so that we can keep the humidity up and also, make sure there's no overgrowth of like bacteria and stuff to cause any sort of, skin issues or respiratory issues and stuff like that. So it's like, it's been a lot of like improving that kind of stuff. And really my goal there has been, one, husbandry, and two, making the place a nice experience for guests to see, right? It's not a good experience when you go there and you just see a snake in a big empty box. When you have like stuff around it, you feel like the thing is living like a naturalistic-esque life. It's a lot more of a better experience for like people to go there. And part of what I've been trying to instill into the team there is like, I feel like a lot of times the attitude, especially when you work at a zoo, and it's like if you're only going to work there for like a few years or so, it's like the attitude becomes like, how do I make this easy for me and just get through my day, right? And trying to reorient people to motivate them to be like, well, one, as a zookeeper, your number one job is taking the utmost care of the animals. These are individual animals that are here. They're not getting replaced unless they die. How do we keep them alive and give them the best life possible, right? So optimizing care as if they were like your own personal pet. It's like, yes, I know you're probably going to work here for like 2-4 years and then leave and it's going to be someone else's problem. But how do we take care of these animals as if they were our own pet, as if we wanted them to live forever? You know what I mean? Like, how do we try to make that happen, right? And then two, it becomes creating a good guest experience, making sure that people come back to view these things. Because when you're at a zoo, that's a for-profit company that makes money off of people visiting. It's easy to go there and be like, oh, we just feed and take care of these animals. But if people don't come to the zoo, if people don't come to visit those animals, where's the money going to come from to pay for those animals' food and to pay for your paycheck, right? So that's like the number one thing, is making sure that it's a positive experience for all the people that are going there. Not just, oh, I don't want, this and that enclosure because then I have to clean it every week. You know what I mean? So there's been a lot of that kind of thing, that it's been like, how do we redirect towards like making this the best place to live as an animal, for the animals, right? And then making it a good experience for the people that are visiting, because the happier those animals are, the better they're doing, and the better their enclosures look, the better the experience for the people, because it all ties in. People want to see the animals in naturalistic enclosures. People want to see the animals thriving. They want to see them healthy. They want to see them interacting. If you have a snake that's sitting on a concrete floor, it's like, oh, cool, big snake. But, if you have logs and stuff in there, it's hiding in the bushes, people go up and they look in the enclosures and they're like, oh, where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's behind that bush, or like, oh, it's up on top of that log, like climbing up there, that kind of stuff, right? Versus just like, oh, there's a snake on the ground. Next one.
Yeah, and like maintaining that naturalistic behavior so that people can, they're not just, like you're just saying, they're not just seeing a snake in a box. They're seeing a snake exhibiting natural behaviors in an environment that's designed for them. And yeah, I feel like that, oh gosh, what's like, not, is it apathetic? Like people start feeling like as time goes on, we just need to make sure that we can do this as fast and easy as possible for my own benefit rather than the benefit of the animal.
Yeah. And there's always a balance, but especially with a zoo, like I said, there's like that difference there between like sanctuary and zoo, where and they do blend over. There's a balance, right? Like sanctuary is a lot more like, how do we do this efficiently so we can provide care for all these animals, and we don't care about the looks too much necessarily. We just want it to work for them and them be healthy. Whereas the zoos has an emphasis as well on the looks of it, and there's a balance because one, obviously, you have to have the time to be able to take care of the animals in the zoo, not just be doing maintenance on like plants and stuff all day. And then two, that naturalistic stuff, but cohabiting animals that are from like, similar regions together that don't mess with each other, like iguanas and tortoises or something. Or like putting logs and trees and stuff in there for them to climb in and hide in, helps simulate natural behaviors and give them enrichment that is really just going to make them happier and make them feel more like they're in the wild and make them feel more, I really think that animals can get depressed to a certain extent. I don't think depressed the way that we do, but it definitely bogs them down mentally. Like you can tell when an animal's like inside of like a Tupperware its whole life versus an animal that's in a big enclosure where it's moving around. There's a lot more like inquisitiveness, and there's a lot more like kind of like, I don't know, just interest from the animal's end. Like you can tell that animal's experiencing everything on this planet learns the same way we do. Cause and effect. They go around in their environment, they do things, they learn that when they do this happens. They go up and they're building these neural networks in their brains, their little tiny brains, just the same way we do. So when you have an animal that's allowed to do all that its entire life, you get a much more smart animal. You get friendlier animals, I think, towards people. You get animals that I think generally are just smarter and like tend to live longer because I think they're happier and they're more active. You know what I mean? Versus animals that are just kind of like, I'm alive, I'm here. It's like a person who's like, going out and like living their life and they go out and hike and stuff like that, or an active person versus someone who hangs out in their house and watches TV. It's like the person who hangs out in their house, watches TV, potato chips all day is happy. They're fine. They're alive. But, they're probably not going to be as, long-lived as somebody who's more active and whatnot. So I think the same thing does kind of apply to animals.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that it's like, again, that kind of just goes to standards of care. Like you can do the bare minimum, again, we could do a whole other episode about what's the bare minimum for yourself? Like, take care of yourself like you would the ideal care for a critter. But when you're providing that care to an animal, like it sounds like, especially in the zoo, it sounds like there's so many benefits to treating those animals with the utmost respect, making sure they have all of those freedoms to, natural behaviors, health. Their enclosures are set up like a 5-star resort for them.
Yeah.
Because that's a better experience for the guests. They're more likely to come back. And again, it's such a weird balance that we kind of face as people in the animal industry of making sure that it's not just about the money, but it's impossible to deny the importance of that money. Because like even you said, if I had $1 million, you know how many animals I could help with that? Yeah. Like that's really the forefront. But right.
And that's, I think, the thing. Yeah. I think that's part of the thing, is that there's just not a lot of funding for animal welfare is what it comes down to. If there was enough funding for animal welfare, places like the Phoenix Herp Sanctuary, who's the largest reptile sanctuary in the United States, could have a 20-acre lot and give every single animal there like 10 times the amount of space they have, So it's like things like that. It's like, if it's not that people aren't out there doing the work and are willing to do it. It's just that there's, there needs to be more people willing to support it. And there needs to be more funding towards it,
Exactly. But in terms of Out of Africa and Sonoran Reptiles, if folks wanted to be the people that fund and donate and help out monetarily, where would be the best place for them to go in order to do so?
Yeah. Well, if you want to help out Sonoran Reptiles, the organization that I run, you can just look us up online. Sonoran Reptiles will pop up. We're the first one there. Sonoranreptiles.com is our website. You can donate on there. Also, if you're in the Arizona area, we take donations for all kinds of things, supplies and stuff like that. And help out other organizations. I always like to tell people, it's not. It's all a community effort. If we get calls from other groups all the time. They have things that are left over that they're going to get rid of, and they send it our way. They're like, "Do you need this? Do you want this?" Yeah, look up a rescue in your area. Make sure that they have a 501c3 IRS tax ID, so that you can confirm that they are in fact a nonprofit, so that they're reporting to somebody about what they're doing with the money and making sure it's going to animals. But yeah, find those groups. Support them in any way you can, donating. You would be surprised the things that like organizations like that need to. If you don't take care of reptiles, if you have like a pet leopard gecko, but you love animals and you watch animals on YouTube, if you have like office supplies, go donate that. Like they use that. We use that stuff. You know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff helps in the long run. Because if we don't have to buy, stuff like that, that's more money that goes towards the animals. In the end, that's more money left over for animals. So yeah, and then Out of Africa, if you're in Arizona, go visit the park. It's in Camp Verde, Arizona. Come see the work we've been doing on the reptile department.
Perfect. Yeah. And all the information, the websites, social media, everything will be linked down in the show notes below. But Brett, thank you for hanging out with me and sharing some info about our scaly friends.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
For sure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Within Range Coaching Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Brett from Sonoran Reptiles and Out of Africa Wildlife Park. It's really clear that the way that we care for our animals, especially in captivity, can have a profound impact on their well-being and longevity. If you're passionate about animal welfare, consider supporting organizations like Sonoran Reptiles or your local wildlife sanctuary. Every little bit helps, whether it's a donation, volunteering your time, or even just spreading the word on social media. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more people that want to help make the world a better place. Until next time, keep caring for our planet and all of its inhabitants, and have fun, stay safe, and be yourself.